There are massive misconceptions in regards to people who act out in anger. Most people think that showing anger is losing control, but it is actually your brain trying to regain control of the situation. Unfortunately, this is the worst way to go about regaining control, and when you understand why you're doing it, you're more likely to be able to understand how to control it. In this video, you'll learn what's really going on in your brain when you get mad, why there is likely more than just anger going on underneath everything, and simple ways that you can regain your control in a healthy manner. When it comes to being angry at others, the biggest concern is always the damage that you're doing to the relationship. Let's take a look at a common situation where this is the case. So there's this guy, let's call him Jim. He just came back from Home Depot in order to pick up some parts in order to work on a shed that's going in the back. His buddy is supposed to be showing up in an hour in order to give him a hand, but as he is opening up the door, he receives a text. Guess what? He can no longer show up. So what does he do? So he picks up the phone immediately, gives him a call, calls him a jerk, throws his stuff down, goes and sits on the couch, turns on the TV, sits there in silence for a few good hours, and then later on that night, him and his fiance go out to dinner with family, ruins it. So, step one, what's really going on in your brain as he's getting that text message? If you're walking down the street and you see someone approaching you with a knife, what do? You get scared. If someone gives you a gift, how do you respond? You're happy. And if you see someone that's attractive at the bar, you're likely to become infatuated. So, what does anger do? Anger is designed to protect you from threats. It can defend you in a physical altercation. It can let you know that someone is trying to take advantage of you, and it can provide motivation for something. As I'm saying this, I can hear you guys out there saying, but there's no threat. All that happened was his friend canceled plans to help him out that day. Exactly. When you respond to a situation with anger where there is no threat, your brain is having a miscommunication with yourself and what's happening around you. It can't tell the difference between something like frustration, criticism, or disrespect. But since anger is designed to protect you, it acts fast. Your brain's complex thinking shuts off and you basically go into autopilot. Think of a situation where you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off out of nowhere. Do you sit there and think about what is the proper way to respond? Or do you just automatically spin the wheel to avoid the oncoming car? Same thing. This quick reaction is the reason you say things you don't mean, you act before thinking, and logic completely goes out the window. Your mind is in crisis mode and it's seeking to get you out of it as soon as possible. It is preparing for a danger that may or may not even be there. As we just discussed, there is no threat in this situation. Canceling plans typically wouldn't take this type of reaction. It wouldn't be this intense. It wouldn't be this abrupt. And so, what if I was telling you that actually you may not even be mad in that moment? See, anger is usually known as a secondary emotion. That means it is the emotion that gets expressed out to the world, but it may not necessarily be the most important emotion that's going on in the moment. This is why some types of anger is considered healthy and certain types are considered unhealthy. Underneath the anger, there's usually things such as hurt, sadness, jealousy, disappointment, and others. When there are underlying thoughts and emotions to situations, it can complicate the situation even more. It can also cause you to act inappropriately or to use even more intense or sometimes less intense emotions for the situation at hand. Common examples include crying after receiving a gift, getting mad at receiving help, or laughing at a very unfortunate situation of a friend. So let's revisit Jim's story and see if we can really figure out what's happening here. In the moment he received the text, he responded to it as a threat and responded in anger in order to protect himself. But what was he protecting himself from? You see, Jim's friend has canceled a lot of plans recently in the past year, and it's really disrupted their relationship. Typically, he would see him at least once a week when they went to their weekly pool league, and oftentimes would have a lot of hangouts with Jim and his fiance. At this point, he's lucky if he sees him once, maybe in the last 3 months. What Jim was actually missing in the moment was he was feeling abandoned and was feeling generally lonely. Jim's brain is identifying that abandonment as a threat, and so his body is automatically responding with anger in order to protect himself. He is taking control of the situation and is actually pushing his friend away before his friend does it to him. Unfortunately, Jim is unable to either identify that he's having these feelings, acknowledge them, or even have the appropriate coping skills in order to manage them in the moment. And so instead, he responds as if it is a threat. For effective long term management of anger, these underlying emotions will need to be addressed so that you can train your body to not treat these things like a threat to yourself. And I hope to discuss this topic in a future video. Now that we have some insight in regards to why we become mad at others, we can now start to look at some of the ways to manage it. And I'll let you know right now that some of you are going to have a big issue with one of the most effective ways to deal with anger in the moment. Anger is just like anything else. There are both mental and physical cues to be on the lookout for, and once you understand them, you can start to create a plan. Common physical cues include feeling hot, clenching your fists, pacing, talking louder, breathing harder, shaking your leg, cracking your knuckles, or other tics. While common mental cues include mind going blank, thinking about extreme behaviors such as punching someone, no longer listening, making assumptions, exaggerating the situation, and providing excuses to yourself to act in a certain way. Once you identify your specific cues, you can start to monitor your behavior in order to address them in the moment when they arise. Now that you know the cues, let's talk about how to address them. The best and worst option when it comes to managing anger is something that everybody knows and everybody understands, but it usually triggers the most amount of people when it is brought up: calming down. That's right. The thing that causes everybody to get madder in the moment when you address it to them is actually the best thing in the moment. Now, I am saying it is the best and the worst option because it really does depend on what the level of the intensity of that anger is. Most people handle everyday situations. You break a pen, you're a little bit late to work, a little bit of road rage, right? These are the things that happen day in and day out that you are usually able to handle with skills that you've developed throughout your life. This is referred to as regulating your emotions. Calming down is absolutely the best thing to do in the moment when you're still in control of your emotion. The first step is to stop. Stop everything that you're doing. Anger is like a fire. The more things that you add to it, it just causes it to build and build and build and build until it goes out of control. Breathing exercises, challenging your automatic thoughts, feeling your emotions rather than acting impulsively, sitting in silence, closing your eyes and trying to relax, positive affirmations, journaling, and many, many other strategies can be used during this time. Well, what about when you're unable to manage your emotions in a healthy way anymore? Remember when we were talking about going on autopilot? This is called you're starting to enter into a crisis. This is when extreme behavior and thinking are likely to occur. Some people have a low threshold to anger, and some people have a high threshold for anger. But that doesn't mean that everybody doesn't have a limit of what they're actually able to control. It's at this point that logic goes completely out the window and you're responding only due to the emotional side of your brain. When you are in a crisis, you can no longer manage your emotions in a healthy manner. You need to find a distraction, and preferably a healthy distraction. Leaving the situation, splashing cold water on your face, going to the gym, go making food, watching TV, playing video games, walking your dog, etc. The point is, you can no longer be in this situation anymore. Logic is gone, you're fully reacting on emotions, and at this point, you're working with half a brain. Now, disclaimer: when I say leave the situation, I don't mean leave it forever. I mean take the time to leave the situation. That way, you can get your emotions back down to a level that you can handle. Once you're back in emotional regulation, you can then reapproach that situation and deal with it in a much healthy way than you can when you're responding solely on emotion. If you don't go back, you're causing two very, very bad things. You're causing a habit of avoidance, and also, in a lot of times, you can build resentment for situations or building resentment for people because you've never actually dealt with the situation that bothered you in the first place. Okay, let's revisit the situation with Jim once again. Now that we know the skills, we're going to go in a step by step way in both managing when he's still in control of his emotions and then also when he's not in control of his emotions. And everybody out there that's listening to this right now can use this in their own way in order to deal with their anger at this specific moment. So, as Jim receives the notification that his friend is no longer to be able to come, he notices his face is getting red, he notices that he's clenching his fists, and he notices a desire to immediately pick up the phone and reach out, call his friend, call him an idiot, or any other negative term that he has. So it's in this moment he realizes that his anger cues are starting. It's at this point he decides to stop. He's not going to add fuel to the fire. So what does he do instead? He decides that he's going to put his phone down. He's going to go to the kitchen and grab himself a drink. And in that moment, he's going to tell himself, I don't actually want to end my relationship with him at this time. So he's already seeking to address the things that are happening in the moment. The hope is that once you can bring that anger down, you can start to look at some of the other things that are underneath it, right? The underlying emotions, the primary emotions. So it's in this moment he realizes that he's actually upset. He feels like he's being abandoned. So when he's thinking about trying to reach out to him and have a discussion, it's not with the idea of anger, right? It's the idea is that he's upset, which is a totally different conversation he's going to have. But what does it look like if Jim is unable to handle his emotions in that moment? If he can't and he just goes higher and higher and higher and builds that anger and he reaches a crisis point. Fortunately, Jim has also been working on his crisis intervention skills. So it's in this moment he realizes that he's not in a place to be able to handle the situation, or he's becoming very close to not being able to handle the situation. So in that moment, he decides, once again, put his phone down. He goes to the bathroom, splashes some cold water on his face, and then he decides he's going to take the dog out for a walk. And he's going to leave the phone at home. The hope is when he comes back from the walk, he'll be in a much better position in order to have a conversation with his friend. While the outward appearance of anger is very difficult to see, it is an attempt by the body and the brain in order to regain control of a situation that is quickly going out of control. In the original story, Jim was unable to use skills or at least identify what was happening in the moment. But after he worked on emotional regulation, crisis intervention, and identifying cues, he was much better able to handle the situation in the moment. When dealing with anger, it's important to note, just like any other negative emotion or positive emotion, that you can't prevent feeling it any more than you can prevent yourself from feeling happiness, jealousy, or anxiety. It's just the way of life. But you can decide how to address those situations in the moment. Are you going to let that emotion dictate how you behave, or are you going to establish control over the emotions that you're experiencing? Seeing the cues, having a plan for how to address them, being able to pause in the moment and be able to apply those skills is the most important thing that you can do in those moments. And for long term change with anger, it's often very important, like I noted earlier, to address those underlying emotions. That way, your body stops responding to them as a threat and can instead address them for what they really are. If this video helped you, please subscribe to see future videos where I'll continue to discuss negative emotions, including anger, and ways that you can approach them in the moment and have better mental health moving forward. Thank you for checking in.